Where are we going to start? We're going to start I forgot to put down exactly what we're going to do. We're going to start with, we're going to pick up from last week and finish that off. I'm going to talk about the assignment that's going to be due pretty soon, the presentation that you'll be doing. I'm going to be giving you some vocabulary. I'm going to be, with this PowerPoint, I've included remarks from other people online from last week. And then we're going to go into the article that you read for this week and Watson's, and I'll introduce you to the Secret Garden because I've got that assignment listed. So from last week, the upcoming assignment and presentation, that's where we left off. So let's go right there. Where am I? I am in W. And I don't have it listed. Do I not? I know I have it listed someplace. Don't I? Oh yeah, there it is. Under assignments. Getting used to this is a challenge. So what you'll do is find 4 passages, unless I tell you otherwise, and I don't think that's going to happen, in various parts of the novel we're reading, because I want you to demonstrate to me that you've read the entire novel and gotten through it, because I really want you to read the entire novel. That might be interesting to focus on regarding 2 paper topics. So that means you're going to have 2 passages for each topic, which means 4 passages from the novel. To demonstrate, you might consider The Wonderful Wizard of Oz and its capitalist nature. That's the first topic. And the second topic is power and destruction of powerful women. So do some research, scholarly research, whether or not a scholar has already written about that topic. There's quite a bit of material that's been written on, for instance, The Secret Garden, on, I can't even remember what we're reading. I'm so...
Watson's, Wicked, Wizard of Oz.
Watson's, there's actually quite a bit written on Watson's.
The Giver.
The Giver, lots has been written on The Giver. Do some research, discover whether or not a scholar has already written about that topic. Identify 1 article, book, or book chapter, scholarly. If no scholarship exists, identify 1 article that might be useful in writing your paper and explain why it would be useful. So you're trying to come up with a newish idea to write on. I want a title and a bibliography. So here is this one. And the first part of it's a setup, and then the second part discusses the scholarship. And there will be 2 passages in this text and 1 scholarly article. So this one is called Quid Pro Quo, Capitalist Influences in the Wonderful Wizard of Oz. And it reads, when Dorothy asks Oz to return her to her Kansas home, the big head admonishes, quote, you have no right to expect me to send you back to Kansas unless you do something for me in return. In this country, everyone must pay for everything he gets, end quote. Oz's response reveals a capitalist impulse. Thus, I could write a paper based on the capitalist nature of The Wonderful Wizard of Oz. A less obvious but still relevant passage, so that was my first passage, regarding the effects of capitalism occurs earlier in the novel when the Tin Woodman describes the efforts he must go through as a human in order to secure the hand of a Munchkin girl who lived with an old woman who did not want her to marry anyone, for she was so lazy she wished the girl to remain with her and do the cooking and the housework. The Munchkin girl won't marry him until he can, quote, earn enough money to build a better house for her, so I set to work harder than ever. So that's the Tin Woodman, or the Woodman at that time talking. Unfortunately, the harder he works, the more body parts he loses, and the closer he comes to being entirely alienated and dehumanized, terms associated with Marxist critique. with a Marxist critique of capitalist economy. I wouldn't expect you to know about that dehumanization in your first round in graduate school, dehumanization and alienation. But if you've studied some Marx, you should have been introduced to that. All right, so here's where, now that I've set it up, I've got the two passages in there. Some scholarship does already exist on capitalism and Oz. For instance, William R. Leach includes in his introduction, The Wonderful Wizard of Oz, a discussion of Baum's philosophical leanings embedded in the novel. Leach writes that the novel offered, quote, the particular ethical and emotional needs of people living in a new urban industrial society. And it goes on. And that's really too long of a quote. Cut that quote down. Shame on me. Said simply, Oz gave consumers permission to be consumers. Now that's a good thing to do, is when you can, if you have a long passage, then get something pithy out of it. I think that's a pretty smart little sentence there. So that's the first one. If for the second one, it's called Another Witch Bites the Dust. Be careful how you say that. The Terrible, Wonderful, Wicked Women and Witches of the Wonderful Wizard of Oz. Wow. And so I would introduce the text on that one, including two passages, and then identify a scholarly text that would go with it. And if it doesn't address the Wizard of Oz directly, then it's okay if it would address the idea. The scholarship would address the idea. So, I don't know. There probably has been. Pretend that there isn't anything written in terms of capitalism, that this article written by Leach doesn't really exist. And so you couldn't refer to it. So in the second one, or in that one, you could say that Marx, in whatever it is, talks about alienation and, what's that other word? Dehumanization. What is it? Dehumanization in his critique of capitalists. And you'd need to quote from that. That's probably a little bit big to go into. Find an article, a scholarly article or a book chapter or something like that. Is this making sense now? Chris, I know you had some questions earlier.
Yeah, I was just, so it's any book that we're reading in class.
It's the book that we are reading at that time. Oh, no, yeah, I'm sorry, yeah. Any of the books that we're reading in class, because all of them are due on that is it the third week or the fourth?
Fourth week, I think third and fourth, it looked like on the syllabus.
No, it's just week 4. It's just week 4.
Okay.
So you've got a couple weeks to get it, because we're doing, oh no, well, we're doing Secret Garden next week, and so it'll be due the following week. And you'll be doing presentations, yes.
So I'm a little confused. So in the fourth week, we will turn in one of these for the Secret Garden, one for Watson, one for...
No, one book.
You just pick one book from the syllabus and then you do it on that one.
Pick one book from the syllabus.
Okay.
So long as it's on the syllabus? Right.
Yeah, it needs to be on the syllabus.
Okay.
Talking about one of those, so that you're getting you're introducing everybody to a little bit of scholarship or something, an idea. Now everybody will turn at the same time. It's just that you will be presenting. Thank you. Bad thing about teaching at this time is my words I've left them all over the place and they're not in my head.
Chris used to do that for you, but I'll take her place.
Yeah, Chris is really good. Chris Rose could read my mind pretty much. So the first one, I'll have people from this class present the first week, because those of you who are if you're not presenting live through the feed, then you'll need to put together a presentation with a voiceover, so that Shay, pretend you can't be here for when you give your presentation. You would need to put together some kind of presentation and you talk us through it. And I could just click into it and we'd hear a video or we'd see and hear a video of you.
Okay, I
So,
got you.
yeah, I'm not going to have, I'm going to let you guys kind of work through this a little bit. We'll figure it out. I'll put together, I'll see what you want to do in terms of presenting live. So if you guys are online, you can talk to us. You can give me a PowerPoint to go through while you talk through it. But if you're not going to do it streaming live, then you'll need to do some kind of voiceover where you're talking us all through it.
Got you.
Does that all make sense?
Yes.
Good, good. So that probably means I'm going to get a lot of people streaming in. But I'm going to set it up where you have some time to work through that. So do I have, say, for the people that are going to have to do the voiceover, so we can start with the live class, or if you guys, somebody knows that you're going to be streaming live and want to present that way, send me an email and tell me what dates are good for you for presentation. You can see them listed on our calendar, and whether you want to do it streaming or if you want to do a recording. So that's what everybody online needs to do. Was that just completely muddled? Okay. Just
even if I join live, is it okay if I do a voiceover like I did last semester?
Sure. Yeah.
Because I at this time of night, I'm the same. Like I'm done.
Yeah. What happened to those words? Where are they? I knew they were there someplace. Yeah, I surely do get that. And then you provide also your bibliography.
Okay, so just really quickly to clarify, any book is okay from the syllabus, or did you want a book that we had read up to week 4? So only
No,
Watson?
any book in the syllabus,
Okay.
including Watson's, if you want to do that, or Secret Garden, or anything after that.
Okay, awesome.
Anything on the syllabus.
Okay.
Sound good?
Yes, ma'am.
All righty. So there's that part. Now, when you get home, you start working on it, you're going to say, what did she say? Oh, and by the way, folks online, you should have access to this PowerPoint because I loaded it up for you.
Yes, ma'am.
All right, what questions do you have so far about the assignment, about the class, about anything?
What exactly is the presentation? Like, what are we're just
You're going to talk about the articles and spend about, for the people presenting live streaming or live, spend about 10 minutes on that. Those of you who record it, Kirsty, doesn't it take quite a bit of time to do that recording and get that all right, or am I wrong on that?
Oh no, it takes me a long time because I start talking and then I sound goofy and then
it's a long process. So that I'm going to give it 7 to 8 minutes that you could make it last. So a couple minutes less. Yes.
Do we also need to do, if I already said this, I'm sorry, but do we need to do like a poster kind of like we did last fall to have with it?
Yes. Yes, I should add that. So you'll do a poster presentation, just something for us to look at. Or if you want to.
I can send out my one from
that would be fine.
fall and send
Yeah.
out to everybody.
Yeah, just go ahead and do that. Uh-huh.
Can we just bring a slide or PowerPoint presentation for presentation in here?
Yes.
Yeah.
Anything like that will work. But the thing that you don't want to do is read from a PowerPoint. You can read a little bit, but not much. Use it to keep you on track and focused and as a reminder. Now, I'm going to read a little bit more from mine because we have 3 hours here and I need help by the time it's to that point. Next week's assignment is the Secret Garden. Oh, now this is for folks online. The ones that are on face-to-face, those of you here in class, you can wait for your questions to when we get here, but sometimes the online students are going to have more questions about the articles, because I know, for instance, that this week had some terms in it that some of you probably weren't familiar with. I'm going to explain some of those terms, but I'm not going to explain all terms. It's up to graduate students to be curious. I'm counting on your curiosity. So do what you can in order to look up things. So if you read, was Bakhtin and dialogism in that article, look up dialogism. It's available for you, but I'm going to explain it more. And if you still don't get it, post it. For those of you online, post your question. Each week there'll be an area for you to post a question. So on Secret Garden, questions regarding Secret Garden article, you can post it here. But in the meantime, read the unabridged version of the Secret Garden. Alex, you said you're listening to it.
It's the audiobook, yeah.
I'm listening to it as well, and I love it. And it's a pretty enjoyable experience for you. I don't know how long it is.
About 8 hours.
Yeah, I downloaded it off Hoopla too through the library, and
Yeah.
I just started it tonight on my.
Oh, we have it available too.
No, I actually have a card at the Richardson Library.
Oh, that's
and I have
nice.
just about everything, but
Sweet.
it's about 8.5 hours.
Yeah.
So what I do is I speed it up. Now it takes some of the pleasure out of it, but it's a pretty long book. I need to rethink what we're going to do on Wizard of Oz and Wicked. I have those on separate weeks, don't I?
Yes.
Okay. I thought maybe I'd been stupid and put it all together. Good. So I speed mine up and listen to it that way. It works, but it's so pretty to listen to because of the broad Yorkshire. I watched the film, and I've given you a link to the film here. Which one is it?
It was 1993.
I love this version. I may not love it again now, when I watch it again. I get it. So it doesn't let me, but it will this way. This is it. I really dislike Colin.
Mary Lennox was an orphan sent from a far-off, distant land
She's perfect
to
for the
live
part.
in a lonely and mysterious mansion.
You are not to touch anything, and you're not
She's
to go wandering and poking about.
I heard someone crying.
You heard nothing of the sort.
Somewhere in the forbidden rooms,
Who are you?
she discovered a bedridden cousin
Don't you ever go outside? Never.
who'd never seen the light of day, and met an enchanted boy who spoke with the animals.
Animals don't speak to people.
Sure they do. Tell me secrets.
He wouldn't tell you my secret, would he?
Together,
Maybe we could find the door to my mother's garden. I've been in the secret garden. I found the key.
they discovered the mystery and the magic.
Yes. Imagine this.
That lies just beyond the garden wall. It is the one special place where miracles grow
You did it!
and a family comes to life.
Brought us back to life, Mary. Something I thought no one could do.
It is the one special story of friendship that has captivated generation after generation.
Are you making this magic? You are.
From the pages of the time-honored classic, from the executive producer of The Black Stallion, The Secret Garden, a place where miracles grow.
Oh, she's so fabulous, and she's perfect in that. The best parts of The Secret Garden.
Oh, no, I can't take it. I haven't read it yet.
Yeah, don't. Well, I don't know how you want to do it. I don't know how you want to do it.
I want to read the book first and then I want to read it.
That's what I like to do because I don't like to ruin the book for me by knowing what's going on.
See?
I'm fine with ruining movies. I don't like ruining books. So
So do you not read a novel twice?
I read novels twice, but like if there's a movie out at the same time, I prefer to read the book first.
Okay.
Me too.
Yes.
There's also an article in Doc Sharing called Crippling Colin. So please, it's a book chapter actually, so please read that as well. I haven't read it yet. I suspect it's going to show versions of, some of the shifts that occur in Colin and his, quote, disabilities.
Speaking of the article, the one that we read this week, is it a good idea to pick up a physical copy of that book? Will you be reading more from that, or was it just that?
You will be, but I will have provided it.
Okay.
I wouldn't. I'm not crazy about the book. And this is something to keep in mind when you're doing your own work. I opened up and started reading one of the chapters, and it gave a Webster's definition of adaptation. Don't use dictionaries. I'm going to come back to that. Say no to dictionaries is what I use. So when I saw that, I thought it really took it down a lot when that chapter, and it was handled rather awkwardly, whichever. And so I kind of, but there's the one on Wicked and the Wizard of Oz in there. So, and that should be available already. For Wicked. Yeah.
Such a good book.
Wicked?
Yeah. Read it in like 8th grade, I think.
Oh God, it's been forever since I read that one.
Wicked?
Yeah.
Well, here's the funny thing about The Secret Garden. Our 4th grade teacher, Mrs. Mulholland, read it to us, and here I am all these years later teaching it. Now, some of the things we're going to talk about, like SEX, she did not bring up.
Say what?
Say what? True, true, true. I can point out all the dirty passages.
It's my favorite part.
So that's what we're doing for next week. It's going to take, if you read it, you'll pick up the dialect, the broad Yorkshire, quick, eventually, but it's a struggle just to start with it. It's lyrical though. So what kinds of things will we discuss in class, and how will we discuss adaptation? As we already talked about a little bit, we're not going to be necessarily saying, oh, the book was so much better. Rather, we're going to talk about the ideological shifts that occur from text to film, or from whatever to whatever. There were several. This was the first time I watched Watson's. I think I watched it 3 times yesterday. And wow, some of those shifts are major. And we're going to talk about what happens, what they might need to, or what seems to be, what the goal of that adaptation, that change, that shift might be, or what it could be. We'll never know, because even if we talk to the authors or the director, we still wouldn't know. They lie. All of them lie. They're liars. Those who write novels, they lie. That's how they make their living. Professional. Yes. And the whole thing, we really would have to talk to a director or producer. They probably have a better idea of what they had in mind to change in terms of how they redo the film, revise it, re-see it, however, whatever they do with it, or the book. So we can't really, we could talk, there's probably material available what do you call it, the extras on a DVD.
Special features.
Special features. I don't know. I just now got the hard copy, the DVD copy of mine. I watched it through Netflix.
I watched it on YouTube.
Did you? Okay. Yeah. Yeah, I have a Roku and I can watch YouTube through my Roku. I don't have network television. I just stream everything.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know, I haven't had cable in like 4 years. I'm just like, I'll just watch it on Netflix or Hulu, and if it's not there, I'll see if it's on YouTube, and if it's not, I guess I won't watch it.
There you go. No, you'll watch it. All of them are available on Netflix or Amazon, one of the two. Mostly Amazon. A little bit about MLA. This is my little MLA lesson for the night. You italicize book titles, film titles, and journal titles. You use quotation marks around the titles of poems, short stories, and article titles.
Okay.
Does everybody get that?
Yes,
if you have a question, just don't guess. I hate it when folks guess. You can go to the Purdue OWL and look up MLA. That's 8th edition. If I haven't already put it there, I will put the 7th edition MLA in document sharing, and I don't think I have. So don't guess on this stuff. That annoys me. I want you to be conscientious of all of your work. And as I said, say no to dictionaries. Instead, go to the people who know best. For instance, you can go, for instance, to Google Books and look up adaptation, see what shows up. Adaptation, that's a pretty good title. And I bet there is a definition of adaptation in here. So instead of going to a dictionary, you go to the professionals, because as you read in this article today, adaptation is really, it's not just cut and dry. There's a lot to it. And how interesting that when we created this class long ago, Dr. Rogenkamp and I, we're not film scholars, neither of us are, but we wanted to change the folk and fairy tales class into something that could be more flexible and more contemporary. So we called it transformations. And in that process, we could use all kinds of things in that, teach all kinds of texts through that, literary texts and films and stuff. So we chose transformations, and so just handily, transformations and adaptations are completely connected. And then I'm sure there are lots of others. And then if you go, did I show you the library? Mm-hmm. Okay, so you could, there are articles in there that are going to give you a definition of adaptation, if you were going to use it. There are scholarly books. There will also be dictionaries and encyclopedias, and it's kind of okay, but go to somebody, to a text where they really, suss it out and look carefully at the definitions and kind of undo it. I think the article I've given you would be a pretty good one to use if you were going to define adaptation, if you were going to write that 20-page paper or do a bibliography or something like that and had to define it. Although you'd probably draw from several texts to see how each author defines it and who they look to for their definitions. So, no to dictionaries. And Wikipedia. No. I look to Wikipedia. I don't tell anybody about it. Oh, drats. I just told you. But I don't quote it. I jump off of it. I can't imagine what would probably kind of stun you if I came in with a Wikipedia definition and we followed it, especially if you found out it was wrong. This is from the discussion board from last week, so that I get to kind of bring some materials in. Christy McDermott said she really enjoys the streaming option. I don't know. Is it still working out for you guys online right now? Still?
Yeah. Yes, ma'am.
Good. I'm glad. Because I intend to always do mine dual modality. So as long as I have physical people in the class, I can do that. Okay, Shay, there you are. So you discussed the Purist battle, and what my question was, it kind of got a question out of me. Have you ever read an adaptation from film to novel? What have you read?
The Fog by Dennis Etchison was one.
It started out as a film and went to...
Yeah, it was a John Carpenter film first. Dennis Etchison, who was a good writer of original fiction in his own right, wrote the novelization.
Okay, yeah, it's called the novelization. That's something that we should use, a term that I should have used. Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a whole string of...
There are a lot of them, right? I mean, a lot of times the real writers will write novelizations for a paycheck.
For paychecks.
A lot of them are done very well. I mean, they add color to the story. They include information that's not in the movie.
There's a lot of Star Wars novels out now too that came out after the films.
Well, look what I picked.
That's amazing.
Come on. Come on. There you go. Star Trek. I picked Star Trek.
Oh, that's a good one.
Well, the TV show Castle was about a crime writer, and they actually produced books by Richard Castle. They were awful. They were really bad, but they did.
And they're still publishing them, I think.
They are. I don't know why.
Yeah,
don't get it, but it's a weird twist.
Yeah, so this has got plenty. There are lots of for all of the series, so that there's all of these. All of the series, they're novelizations.
The episodes into novels? Like these are the actual episodes they just made into novels?
I think they...
Or they're new ideas?
It's kind of both. From my experience, I'll admit, I read a stack of Star Trek novels in the 90s when Next Generation was on. I
love Next
Generation. The novels from Next Generation era.
I love Next Generation. Jean-Luc.
Some of them were episodes, and some of them were just original stories.
Jean-Luc's going to have another series.
Yeah.
Who is?
Jean-Luc, as Jean-Luc Picard. There's
really?
Way.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I'm so excited about that one.
Oh, Jean-Luc. Just so, it's enough for me to be able to say Jean-Luc. And as I say in this, don't think anything of not having read the Green Book or heard of it. I don't even remember how my attention got drawn to it. None. I wish I had a history in my mind like you can do on your internet, that you can see where you've been. Except for sometimes my searches are pages long for a day. Yeah.
Say I'm glad I don't have a history stored of where I've been in my mind, but
well, we do.
Some things are lost.
There's some things that shouldn't be. But
some things best forgotten, right?
But sometimes I get really frustrated at not knowing how I got to where I got, because there was a logical progression to it, probably.
One thing leads to another.
That's right. Of course, with the internet, everything's it's a wormhole or whatever. Black hole. Something I did want to bring up with this, as I said, it's generally been overlooked because it served the Black community, and so it didn't matter. It didn't. Who cared about what they experienced in order to cross the country? But people do care, and now that we've got it digitalized and it's available easily through internet, it brings that information to the fore. Having said that, one of the questions you always have to ask is, why did it get digitalized and not something else? So there's politics involved, for instance, in the digitalization and making materials available for everybody. So the Brownies book is available, and that was edited by W.E.B. Du Bois for, I think it lasted a year, 2 years, or something like that. And it was written for Black children during the Harlem Renaissance, because they didn't have anything to read about what they said their own people. They didn't get to see themselves at all reflected in anything. The parades that were being held were all about white people. Government's all about white people. The people that they read about are all white people. And the books that they're getting are written by white people, handed down to them secondhand by white people. So it's, you can see how that kind of measures out. Now, and I still don't know how choices get made, because if you go to Google Books, you've got access to texts that are from the late 1700s, 1800s, easily, and before. Yeah, you can access a Shakespeare digitally. That is such a hard word to say. I wish they would have figured out something else. So there's that. And this is from Cheyenne. She wrote, Victorian authors very rarely, if ever, mention sex, but many Victorian film adaptations include these types of scenes. Now, I know this class isn't about Victorian literature, but I think the examples help illustrate this idea that perhaps we need to look at literary texts and their adaptations as separate pieces, which I entirely agree with, that may or may not share similar themes, characters, settings, and dialogue. And I want to talk about those uptight Victorians for just a moment, because the sex is there. It's just heavily coded in the Turn of the Screw. That thing's full of sex or sexual desire. It's not actual sex, probably. Full of sexual desire, just girly contained. Questions of whether the governess perhaps has something for her young charge, the young male charge, what's his name? I can't remember. Who ends up, she kills him. He ends up dead, I believe, in the end of the novel. Even though I read that, I don't know how many times. When you watch the film, there are a couple of versions. You can really kind of see that tension. It's more visible that tension exists. Yes.
Just completely eluded me on it. The Henry James novella?
Yeah.
The ghost story?
Yeah.
So I'm gonna have to read it again.
Oh, oh yeah. It's all over the place. Her fascination for the guy who has the mansion, she's hot for him, can't stand it. And it comes out more clearly in the adaptation. They play that out. Yeah.
Read it. Maybe that's just not what stood out to me.
No, it doesn't. There's a reason for that, because you don't expect it to. So when I pull stuff out on the secret garden and say, hey, look at this, you know, when they're digging in the moist soil with the little spade of theirs, when I start talking, it's true. It's there. Because you don't expect it from children's lit, but it's there because it's a novel of awakening. It's a novel of rebirth, and that robin that hops around, getting frisky with the little females and stuff. Yeah, it's all over the place. Dickon is he's kind of a pan character, very attractive. I really feel that you can see that the deep attraction with Mary towards Dickon, and you can see the jealousy occur in the film more. Now, I haven't seen the film for quite some time, so I could be making stuff up, but I don't think I am. So the ability of a film to make something more visible, now it doesn't always, it can still remain coded. It could still remain kind of latent. and I like to use the term latent better than I do hidden. I don't know why. I guess it's because it sounds kind of devious that, oh, the author hid that. No, not necessarily. The author might not have known that she put that in there, that it just comes out because we're such psychological, sometimes psychotic creatures. And so one never knows what actually works its way out through the words an author puts down on paper. What was that other part?
Whoa.
So I'll leave it at that for now. Michael Mattis. Now, Michael, this is you, so you can talk about it. I remember, oh, yeah. And I made the same comment to you when I returned your discussion board post. I remember that Hansel and Gretel cartoon version because it traumatized me as a child. I know that I had nightmares of it. Perhaps I was a weak-minded child, but it still impacted me very much. Dr. Stewart's claim it is harmless, but my young version felt quite harmed. Now, in comparison to other adaptations, it is milder, yet the idea of a witch eating children is still frightening. Yes, so you want to speak to that a little bit, Michael?
I just, as soon as I saw like the cartoon characters and I remember the witch, I can remember like it scaring me as a child and thinking, well, this is, and you were kind of making light of the fact that it wasn't as scary as the others, and I just immediately like had a gut reaction that I can remember as a kid that it scared me. I mean, I sound like a weakling saying that, but
no, please don't.
Yeah, but I just like even their faces look kind of creepy. It just immediately hit me again. Well, I remember.
Yeah, the kids are kind of creepy with those wonky button eyes of theirs.
Yeah.
Pupilless or something. There's something.
Yeah, that's the kids are kind of creepy. There's some things that are that actually would help alleviate some of the fear in the text. And this somebody who's written about Where the Wild Things Are talks about the animals and the way that they're rounded. Rounded images are less threatening than those with sharp edges. Makes perfect sense. Because not necessarily something that's inherent, but something that we could have picked up culturally. So that a wolf is not going to be, that's dangerous, is not usually going to be pictured as something soft and fuzzy and round. It's going to be sharp ears, sharp teeth, sharp snout to convey its threat. Now, it can be ironic so that you have a threatening wolf that is actually quite roundish, but there's going to be something in that.
Come here.
Also, I thought about the way that it ends, and those kids, what do they say to the witch? They jump up and down, and your mother. Do you remember what it says?
Some kind of insult. It's like, oh, we were really scared of you.
Yeah, your mother rides a broomstick or something like that. I don't know.
A vacuum.
A vacuum.
That's right.
Yeah, your mother rides a vacuum cleaner, and they jump up and
almost frolic out.
Yes, they're so thrilled. Yes, and while they're in that pot, they're round. The pot is round, and once you get to know Bugs Bunny, and you might not. You know that the goodies aren't going to get hurt. That does not change the fact, though, that those kids are in that pot, that a witch is going to eat them, will make what's rabbit stew? It's the German Hassenpfeffer, something like that, out of him if he can do it. So, yes, you made me rethink, and I'm glad you did. There's some things that mitigate that, though, at the same time.
Sure.
I wonder if kids now would be as frightened, because they get exposed to
a lot worse
early on.
Oh yeah.
Now, I used to, the movie that frightened me, that terrified me as a kid was Invasion of the Body Snatchers, and that would have been the black and white version.
Mine was actually Lord of the Rings because of Gollum.
Yeah.
Gollum gave me nightmares
Yeah,
for years.
he's freakish.
Mine was Wizard of Oz.
Wizard of Oz, was it the Flying Monkeys?
The Flying Monkeys freaked me out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it was my sister's favorite movie, so I had to watch it like every day of my life.
Yeah. And then some of the books I read terrified me. I think I wrote in my response to you, my private response to you is that I was afraid of the dark until I was in my 30s. I would jump into my bed because I was afraid of the dark from a child forward, and it took me the longest time to get over that. Now I'm fearless. Nothing will bother me.
Nothing's gonna get me.
Nothing's gonna get me.
I was scared of Titanic too.
Well, there sure are some movies I don't want to watch because I know what's going to happen. I just say, no, I just don't want to deal with this. I tend to like to frighten myself now, though, because I watch zombie movies. I don't watch Friday the 13th movies, those kind. I watch anything I can get my hands on with Stephen King.
Go to sleep.
A whole bunch of, I'm really drawn to that. I'm drawn to the Gothic stories, Woman in White. I can't remember. I just search for them constantly. Then Danielle Poole said, then there are the movies that add to the books, and that added dimension makes the book worth reading again. Only my opinion, but Miss Peregrine's Home for Peculiar Children, where the book fell a little flat, but the movie was phenomenal and made the book worth reading. I haven't seen the film yet.
I did read it last semester.
What did you think of it?
I loved the book.
Did you? See, when I read it, I didn't read it. I didn't make it through. I got bored, and I don't know why. I still have it.
There was a couple of times where it definitely slowed down enough that I was like, this is, but for the most part, I really enjoyed reading the book. It didn't take me too long to finish it either.
Yeah, because there's lots of pictures.
7th graders.
Yeah?
At the end of the year. Yeah, it's tough for them, so we listen to the audiobook in class a lot and, follow along.
How is that?
I love the audiobook.
Okay, well, I love audiobooks, so I'll just listen to that.
Yeah, I like it, and they enjoy it. It's hard for them because it's really more on a high school reading level than a 7th grade reading level, but because they're so interested in it, it keeps their attention. But surprisingly, most of them have told me they prefer the book over the movie.
Okay.
Which is weird for 7th graders because...
Yeah, it is. But it has the pictures in it, which are pretty engaging. As you can see, I posted some of them here. So there's this creepy face on the back of a head. Kind of reminds me of American Horror Story stuff.
Mm-hmm.
If you watched American Horror. Yeah, this is like,
yeah.
That doesn't have a head. Thomas Simon, I enjoyed the exploration of Hansel and Gretel, as well as taking a look at the grandmother story. I've seen other versions of these tales as well, so it was fun to get the alternative look. I noticed Snow White, A Tale of Terror was mentioned, which is a film I've seen several times, so have I, and once wrote an undergraduate paper on it for a young adult literature course. I enjoyed this because I had very rarely encountered anyone who has viewed the film before. I can't remember if I showed anything from the film.
I've never even heard of that.
I thought I told you a little bit about it. Sigourney Weaver, Sam Neill, what a film. Dark, psychological. See, Snow White and several other stories share this one thing about Daddy Dearest. And that is that there's this desire for the father. A daughter's desire for the father. The daughter and the stepmother become competitors for the father's attention. And in actual psychoanalytical terms, that does occur. Psychologists would tell you, yeah, it happens. It's just a matter of being able to not follow through on it. That's the key. In fact, that's part of development of a child, to make that break from the father if it's a girl, the mother if it's a boy. So having to make that break is critical in the development of a child. In these folk and fairy tales, though, there's this big competition. Snow White got the competition, not so much between the stepmother as with the sisters, but it's still there. There's also a story, and I didn't have you read it, it's called Donkey Skin, and it's French, and it's by Perrault, wrote it down. It's an oldie, what is it, 18th century, 1700s, and it's a story of a young woman, a couple, a king and queen, they're married, they have a beautiful child, but they're not so interested in their child. They're really interested in each other. Oh, it sounds like kind of the beginning of Secret Garden, actually. But the mother dies, and on her deathbed, she tells the father, I want you to remarry. I really do. I want you to remarry, but she must be as beautiful as I am. Guess who's going to be as beautiful as she is? The daughter, yes. Which in the film, it's in French with Catherine Deneuve. Does anybody know who that is? She's gorgeous. The film is from the 70s. And so she goes through all this process of trying to push away her father, and she finally runs away. And then she finds her prince and marries him and comes back home. But there's that whole battle back and forth to fight that incestuous impulse. And the only way she can do it is to run away. But it's the mother who sets it up in the first place. You must marry, but she must be as beautiful as me, and nobody else is going to be as beautiful as her. So let me show you a little bit of Sigourney Weaver and that whole thing with Snow White, because there's a competition there between the daughter and the stepmother, and it's really evident in Tale of Terror. And in fact, it looks like Liliana, the daughter, actually tries to provoke that jealousy, and it makes Sigourney Weaver kind of ugly. Of course, she's really ugly when it comes down to who she actually, the image of who she is, because she is able to maintain her appearance of beauty, kind of like a Dorian Gray story, through the mirror that she watches, that she has. You can already tell how hard it's going to be. The music, mystical music.
Did you think you could hide from me?
The seventh dwarf.
Did you
one of them's not a dwarf, and he becomes mother.
If you're going to play cat and mouse, just remember, I'm the cat. That's better. You mean to eat your own?
Yeah, that.
What's the matter, dear? Cat got your tongue?
That's the mirror.
I don't know what's next on my watch list.
It's pretty. Oh.
A Tale of Terror.
Let's see if I can find another one.
It's a good movie.
See if it's the same one. Cute little kitty. Is that how the other one started out? The only problem with this is it's hard to see. So much of the film is truly, literally dark. It's at night, and there's some things that are hard to see. But it might be for a good reason, because there's some things that should be hard to see that occur in that. So that was Thomas. Stephanie, is this the right picture of you? I hope it is. I'm so glad that Stephanie brought this up. The lecture ended on a discussion on Ruth and the Green Book. It is a book crafted with much heart and superb illustrations. The cover in particular made me pause after I finished reading. The little girl looks so happy as she clutches her green book, as if all the problems she and her family had encountered are long behind them. But then you look up and you see the mother's expression. Standing close to her daughter, sheltering her as she looks on, knowing what is behind also lies ahead. Her expression is a mixture of worry and resolution, fear and unwarranted hate that surrounds them, but ultimately resolved in ensuring she protects her daughter as they bravely march on. So mother is not in the least bit happy. I don't know why I didn't see that. I'm not very good visually on picture books and things like that. It takes some serious work for me to do it. I usually get to the words. I need to pay more attention. That's right there in front of me for me to see. And now all of you got to see it, if you didn't already. Sarah Anderson, McFarlane, that's from the article, mentions George Bluestone, James Agee, and others in his article who have much to say about literary and film adaptation. Supposed to be adapted somewhat to bring a fresh perspective and just enjoying it as the art that it is and in and of itself. So my question for you so far, have you felt like you've gotten a fresh perspective on some old tales or relatively new ones? Or, I mean, I know most of you haven't seen Tale of Terror, and I know most of you probably hadn't seen the brown illustration of Hansel and Gretel that shows the mother as it does, or any of these. So all of these are giving us new stories. It's all fodder for us to think about. So making the case, I suspect there's some terminology that I want you to get a hold of. I'm not going to go through the article itself and say, oh, this is, what this author says about it, adaptation. I want you to be able to recognize and use some of these words. So knowing the difference between adaptation and transformation. The source text is a text you should use when discussing the text from which a transformation or adaptation is drawn. And I didn't say original because so much of the time, if it's from folk and fairy tales, there is no such thing as an original. We don't know what the original is. We can identify some early texts, but like Cinderella, it pops up all over the world, all of the time in different forms. Zipf's discussion of duplication and revision. Zipf's is really well known in children's and adolescent literature. He's a grouchy German background. He's studied his German. I think he's fluent in German. And so he's gone to the source on many of the German texts and talks about them. He also talks about Harry Potter and the films, and he has a lot to say about everything dealing with folk and fairy tales, especially, or those that have some kind of fantastic background. Parallel novels or texts. The your text, and you'll hear your used in other ways. That's the overarching, kind of like the source of all sources, so that there is no your text when it comes to the Cinderella story. We don't know the origin, and never will unless we figure out a way to go back to a different time. Intertextuality, very briefly, it's when one text refers to another. Obviously, that's going to happen automatically when we have film adaptations or some kind of adaptation. Conventions, so that you can think of it when it comes to folk and fairy tales about their motifs. That's another term for conventions. But conventions generally are then things that you can look for that happen pretty consistently. As I said, with folk and fairy tales, it's motif. So the 3 days, the once upon a time, the habits associated with a particular genre, perhaps, or a type of story. Dialogism, be sure to look that up. Things to consider.
Isn't dialogism in the context of the intertextuality?
It is.
I mean, it's the way
well, let's look.
The texts, the relationships between texts have a dialogue between them, right?
Yes. And it's more than that. Bakhtin had a lot to say about, he wasn't too fond of, well, it wasn't that he wasn't fond of it, but the what do you call those, like the Odyssey, Homer, epics. He didn't think, he's so wrong about this, in my opinion. He said that they were unchanging. Well, maybe the basis of them was unchanging, but every time somebody gets a hold of one, it changes, whether it's by reading it aloud in a different way, by a different translation, perhaps, emphasizing a translation, emphasizing there is nothing dead about or unchanging about those texts. So what he said was that they didn't contain enough back and forth, that didn't hear the voice of the people, didn't hear multiple voices in these. Instead, you kind of heard this voice from on down. Where is it?
On page 10, where he talks about what Bakhtin says about the dialogic thing.
It's on 10?
Mm-hmm. Very on 10.
Mikhail Bakhtin's term, okay, there it is. In general, intertextuality is a study of how texts are related irrespective of chronology. One way to describe the relationship is to say that texts converse with one another. And they do. I was listening to, or I was watching a television show the other day, and it mentioned something from Twin Peaks that I randomly knew that nobody else would know except for those who'd watched Twin Peaks. I got it, that intertextual reference, and it brought a richness to it. It also brought a smile to my face because I thought, I'm smart. I don't know this thing. I don't know that's intertextuality. But they serve as kind of a shortcut. And that's what when I was talking about down the rabbit hole. In fact, I heard that the other day, maybe in the Senate confirmation, or the Senate confirmation hearings for a new justice for the Supreme Court. One way to describe the relationship, say they converse with each other, they have a dialogue with prior texts, consciously or unconsciously. Mikhail Bakhtin's term for such plural text is dialogic. It takes a reader or spectator to bring the dimensions out in the open for text to become dialogic when they are read or viewed. So everything, when I said it pretty clearly last week when I said everything is an adaptation. I mean, Darwin talked about human beings as being adaptations. And when you first type in adaptation on a strange computer that doesn't know your reading habits, it will send you likely to Darwin when you type in just adaptation without film or book or something like that. So nothing exists in isolation. It was Northrop Frye, I think, who came up with the idea that there are 4 kinds of storylines, and they all have to do with spring, summer, fall, and winter, and being ironic, humorous, and I can't remember the rest. Nobody does that anymore because it's called formalism, and nobody's interested in that very straightforward approach because it kind of excludes everything else. It is restrictive and tends to be reductive. So nothing that exists in a vacuum. Everything, we're changed by everything. Every film that we've watched, no matter how many things we've forgotten, it's in there someplace until we're not in existence anymore. So that's that dialogism, that back and forth, that which informs. And the longer that we live and the more we see and observe, the more dialogic we become. I can tell you, I'm really very dialogic, very intertextual with my 10 years of education, my 14 years of research on top of that. You can imagine.
I mean, I want to say it's the level to which works are dialogic is the level to which you are well-read and well-versed in many different modes of storytelling. And I mean, it's like the reference in the article where the guy saying Ira Levin's Stepford Wives.
Yes.
Somebody else says, oh, well, this is a dialogic reference to Bluebeard, who killed off all of his wives.
Exactly.
No, I never would have made that connection, you know. So it's kind of an individual perception.
Yes, and every time I see a woman being punished for curiosity into looking into a room, I know it's a reference or drawn from, consciously or unconsciously, Bluebeard, and her trip to the room, to the Bloody Chamber. Who writes that short story, The Bloody Chamber? Angela. No, it's not Angela, but I always say Angela.
Angela Carter.
Oh, Angela Carter. Yeah, she wrote kind of a parody, it's somewhat ironic of it, but yeah, the home away from the home, away, and home is a really traditional story type. It happens in children's literature and adult literature. You're at home, you learn something, you go out and have an adventure, and come home and rule the day. It happens quite frequently in children's literature. It's kind of a pretty common. because it conveys a sense of comfort in that we might go out, but we always get to come home. So you read a little bit about the adaptations that have, what kinds of adaptations occur. So we know that folk and fairy tales to picture books to novels to film. What other forms of adaptation are you aware of?
Actually, there's a novella called Carmilla. It was written 20-something years before Dracula was. It was made into, it was adapted, yes. Words are not my specialty right now, to a web series, and then that web series was turned into a movie, and now the movie is also getting turned into a storybook and possibly a primetime series.
Heavens. What? Yes.
Great story. Actually, I'm glad you brought that up. It's that Jay Sheridan Leffin was the author, but there were actually some pretty heavy themes in that story
Lots
long
of
before
against female sexuality.
Yes. Yeah.
There's that female stuff going around again.
But the web series
It was very
actually
overt
makes it very empowering to women and very inclusive as well, which I really like.
What about games? Is anybody in here a gamer?
Kind of. I'm a gamer girlfriend.
Or do you know of any games that draw specifically from, have a source text?
Honestly, I don't know. Like, what is it that you guys play? Almost all the questing games seem to have some sort of, like, just the idea of it being an epic quest. It's, always reminds me of a lot of the fairy tale genres.
It's pretty true.
Alex?
I feel like the Warcraft games draw heavily on the Lord of the Rings.
That's true.
I can see that.
I think some games are very direct adaptations.
Yeah,
of either film or novel.
A game called Alice that's supposed to be an Alice in Wonderland.
Yes, Alice in Madness is a really good game.
Okay, so there's one that's really very clearly.
Oh yeah.
So we've got the games. What else? Graphic narratives.
Yeah, graphic novels.
Graphic novels, because there's a series graphic novels that turn folk and fairy tales into adult Snow White.
Is it called Fairy Tales?
It's called Fairy Tales, and I'm trying to think. Witting something or other. Fables. It's called Fables.
There we go. Yeah.
Yes. So here you have, I probably have the first 8 or 10. There's some pretty adult stuff in there. And there's some pretty funny stuff in it because, Pinocchio is really pissed because he has to stay a child forevermore. Yeah, he just, that's not what he wants to do. There are lots of affairs. And since you're dealing with a wolf in there that in human form, there's some, I suppose, bestiality. What do they call it? Comic book sex? Who's the heavy drinker here? Too bad, I'm all done with that. I had the wolves let you come through because it's part of your job as one of the tourists to check up on fables living outside the community. They call individuals fables, so instead of humans are fables.
I'm gonna have to read this.
Legends in Exile. Yeah.
There's also like the graphic novels that come after or even before TV series, like The Walking Dead, Winona Earp, etc.
Yeah.
That I can think of off the top of my head.
Well, and
a lot of manga has been adapted into anime. Like,
it's true.
Okay.
My son watches a lot of anime, and he reads a lot of the manga. So.
Okay, so we can see a lot of things. It's kind of endless, and everything continues to be adapted.
Yeah, and of course there's comic books too. I mean, that's huge right now, Marvel and DC and all that.
We won't know this. We won't know some of these things until we really think about them. So I've asked, what does the adaptation intentionally accomplish? And I put quotation marks around that because I don't usually talk about authorial intent. But when you have adaptation, there is something intentional about it, and there's usually an agenda, or there's often an agenda. And then what are some of the unintended, perhaps negative effects? And that takes some thought to figure that out. And sometimes we don't know until 5 or 10 years later. So let's talk about Watson's Go to Birmingham. And I said the voiceover here transforms this into first person, at least at times. What are your thoughts on film and book, novel?
It was really interesting that it took us 120 pages to get on the road to Birmingham in the book, and it took us 15 minutes in the movie.
It's always like that.
They were two completely, the adaptation in my mind was, going back to what you said at the beginning of the class, it had a completely different drive. They had a different angle, as we used to say in journalism, right? There was a different angle. They had a different idea in mind with where they were going.
An agenda.
There was an agenda that was completely different than, I don't even know that there was necessarily an agenda. I think some themes came out and some ideas came out in the work and the written work. But I thought the book was far better than.
Well, it depends on what you were watching it for, though, because I also watched the 4 Little Girls, and if we're going for true authenticity of the times, I love that they had cousins that were involved in the marches, and I thought it was really cool how they brought in all of the original film of it, and I felt. And from watching 4 Little Girls, they gave some of the attributes of the documentary to Joey, and I was like, they're not going to kill her, are they? Or that would be a huge diversion. But it did freak me out because I had watched 4 Little Girls first, so I noticed, oh look, she's wearing her first pair of heels. Oh look, she's they told her to pull her slip up and not go around looking all shabby. And I was like,
yes, I saw that. Yeah. And you wouldn't catch it. I almost felt like the filmmakers of Watson's drew very heavily from Spike Lee's 4 Little Girls, very heavily. Yes. Did anybody else get that sense?
I thought that the film was more focused on the historical events themselves and what was happening in that situation, whereas the book is much more focused on the Watsons as a family and paints them as this all-American family. And I think, I know we don't talk about author intent, but I think that could possibly have been very intentional of Curtis to say we just want to show you this all-American family who's just like you.
Just like you.
But people hate them because of the color of their skin, bring that sense to life of oh wow, these are just normal, everyday, the all-American family, traveling. Whereas the film does draw heavily, I think, from the Spike Lee documentary. It focuses more and adds those things in, spends less time focusing on Flint and more time focusing on Alabama.
Right.
Again, we can't talk about really what they're intending, but possibly for that intention to focus more on the event. So it's, like you're saying, it's 2 separate work of art. It's one is wanting to focus on the family, one's wanting to focus on the events themselves.
That's right, and it seems too. I'm thinking. I don't know. I have to watch Wrinkle in Time when they add a black character, and I have to watch Z for Zachariah again when they add a black character to see what's happening across the board in these 3. But I think there's something very important happening with race all the way through. So that I really get the sense, even though there's some things dropped in, and we can say that the actual historical context is left for the reader to research on to understand better what's going on, or somebody to fill in those gaps. They're only mentioned, so, that one comment that the mother makes, what's her name?
Luna.
Yeah, yes, a good Southern name, is that at least they're more honest. Well, yeah, they bomb people.
Right.
Is that how you go about honesty? Not the kind of honesty I want to fight.
She doesn't even believe that herself though, because as soon
She's
as
in
the bombing
denial.
happens,
She
they
knows.
fly straight back to Flint without hardly batting an eyelash.
Yes.
So
She's in denial. And I think that was pretty common. I think, yeah, it's pretty common today.
yeah.
So I think you really nailed it with the notion that perhaps even though it mentions some of the civil rights moments that occur, it takes all that time to get there. And it's to, I think, as you said, to make it seem like, to forget that this is a black family. This is just a family, period. With a juvenile delinquent, with the goody two-shoes girl. I love Joey. I love Kenny. I love Byron. I love them all. And to then shove them into this really volatile situation, literally volatile situation. And all of a sudden, this family that you came to know, that you came to probably like quite a bit, they're getting treated like this. Why? Because of the color of their skin. So I think that is a very large part of it. What happens with the film, though?
I almost want to say the film, and I hesitate to use this word, but it felt like propaganda.
Oh, yeah. All of it's propaganda. It's not propaganda. It's just, it has agenda.
Right.
All of it has an agenda.
It was a Hallmark movie, right? I mean,
Yes,
not to
it made for television. There were some parts that you could
had,
really
like,
tell it was made for
Hallmark
television.
stamp all over that thing, but
Except in some ways it didn't because of the
I liked it.
the documentary.
it was.
Oh, that is such a
interspersed
beautiful
with
family.
this.
I do also hate Hallmark.
You know,
High five, y'all.
I think that films that get that idea across, there are a lot of them, right? And many of them did it far better than that film did, in my opinion. Right? This is all just my opinion. The novel, however, succeeded on a completely different level, and again, in my opinion, for my mileage, because it took you to the heart of this family. It helped you get to know these characters. They're human, they have all these problems and in their families that we've all had in our own families or known people that have had, and they're just regular kids, right? Doing regular kid things, having regular kid troubles, and yeah, they're touched by this thing. It takes them into the time at the end, but for my mileage, I think that if there was an agenda on the part of the author to combat racism, right?
Which is what is talked about in the afterword.
And the epilogue makes that pretty clear.
Which does get placed in the movie.
His story for me succeeded better on that level than the movie did for me, which the movie felt like education. The novel felt like something that could transform my ideas about an African American family.
It also is so rich in metaphor.
The red, white, and blue, right?
The red, white, and blue.
And that was in both the film
Yes.
and the book, right?
Yes.
And it was it just kind of slipped it in there, but no, he's saying, the people in this story are just as much a part of the tapestry of our country as any of us, right? And I think that really kind of drove the point home to me.
And the wolf who itself.
Yes. Can we talk
Yeah,
about
this
the wolf
encounter with death, right?
It's an encounter with death, but what if it's a metaphor for racism?
Evil, right?
Pulling it down for the whole country. It drags the entire nation down when we live in a racist nation like that, where it's fine to blow up churches and schools and people's homes because they're black. They came to, if you watch the for little girls, you'll know that they called it Bombingham because of the frequencies of bombing. So what do you want to say about that?
I loved that they took something that was, like, whenever I first read it, I literally laughed out loud, and my husband's like, what are you laughing at? Like, because it caught me so off guard, the wool poo. Like, it's just ridiculous. But then it grew into something that was a very real and scary thing, not just for the kids, but the fact that, like, you saw it in the church, and I was just like, I believe my heart seize up. Like,
I don't think it was a psychological manifestation of his fears. I think we're supposed to believe that he really and truly saw it.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah.
That it exists.
Well, we also talked about, when we read this last spring, you mentioned how magical realism is a big thing, especially in African American culture and literature. And so looking at that aspect of, like, this almost metaphorical thing. And there's another section early on in the beginning when when Byron gets his lips stuck to the window, and he describes it and says, I wondered if we'd be driving around the summer with a skeleton dangling outside the mirror by its lips. And I didn't catch it the first time we read it, but this, like, that imagery of death following them.
All the way through.
Following them where they go. I love the Week2 and the aspect of it, and the question of, is it real or is it not real? You know, was it really there? Did he really see it?
the fact that it was very real to him is of utmost importance. Like, and I felt, I did like the way that the movie did it, because I could actually see how he could see it like that.
I think I saw it like that in my mind. I think that's how I created it, because there was no surprise. It wasn't, oh, that's what it was. I think I might have seen somebody else had sketched it out or something.
I don't know. I don't know exactly what I was picturing. It was not that, but I liked the way that they portrayed it, because I was curious how they were going to, without it looking hokey. And I thought it still looks slightly juicy, but I thought they did a fantastic job with what they had. Like, I really, yeah, I love that whole thing about the Week2.
I do too.
That was really powerful. So.
And it's part of that, like I said, it's part of that metaphor. That's one of the things that I think a novel can do easier than anything else, than a film can, is to dig into those metaphors and use it to enrich the text. So what else was there? Oh, the whole thing about his eyes. Now, he's wearing glasses in the film, so he doesn't have the problem with the lazy eye or the cockeyed, or being cockeyed, because that's metaphorical in itself. He can see just fine. He's not cockeyed. Not, and it's he's not lazy in how he sees the world, not by any means. He's very attuned. He makes all these observations about Byron, and he says, sometimes I just can't figure him out. Yes, you've got him completely figured out.
Right.
So that
he knows how to poke him.
Naivete, yes. And the love between the two. I love that about Byron. Mm-hmm. What I do want to address, how are we doing? 8, 9, okay, on this is what perhaps happens in this particular film, because of, if we're working from the premise that we're supposed to forget that this is a family of color, that we're just supposed to love them for who they are without considering race as part of the equation. That might be easier for people to do now than it has been in the past.
Oh, yeah.
I'm quite sure of that. So it might not have the significance now that it did, for instance, when it first came out. When was it first published?
Mid-90s, I think.
Yeah, so, that's a while back.
95.
It doesn't feel like it was that long ago, but it's 2018, so it has been a while. I was in grad school. No. Yeah, I'd gone back to college, I think. Cool.
Something I found interesting, and I don't know if this has any significance or not, but in the book, what was the mom's boyfriend kind of dude's name? Robert.
Mr. Robert.
Mr. Roberts.
Mr. Robert,
Yeah.
In the
She's
book,
having herself a thing.
yeah, in the book, it didn't seem like that significant.
I thought it seemed pretty significant. He plays a much larger role in the film.
Yeah. I felt like there was just more emphasis on it in the movie
Yes.
than there was in the book. In the book, you could tell that, you know, the mom was kind of like questioning it. She's like, well, where did this guy come from?
What are you doing with this man?
Yeah, but then in the movie, he was like with the kids and.
He's acting as a surrogate father.
Yes.
Or a grandfather.
Yes.
Dad's gone right now.
Right.
And in the film, isn't that the most beautiful family? Oh my gosh. Every bit of them is gorgeous.
Yes.
Probably has an impact.
I thought the casting was great.
Oh yeah.
Do what?
The casting in that film.
Oh yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Except,
see that the ages are
except
off in the book,
I'm
but
I have some trouble with Byron.
I thought he was too short.
I did think he was too short.
I think he looked too old.
Yeah, he looked
Yeah,
old.
And then he became
Age of the character.
sexualized. Because he comes out that white t-shirt wrapped around his neck and he's
Yeah.
Yep.
he's
I was
got the
like,
six pack.
This is
Hello, you are not 13.
Yeah, that was a 20-year-old man.
And especially when he shaves his head,
Yeah.
it becomes much more evident. His anger makes him look so
Even
much
the grandmother
older.
makes a comment at one point about his body, which I don't know if she did that in the book, but
No.
she's like,
Well,
"Oh, you got the body of a grown man." I was like,
I can't remember.
noticed.
Well, yeah, that is the body of a grown man. What? And
But
he's
he's
rich.
only 13 in the book.
Right.
Yeah.
And so that I had to think about that, but I think it's part of a sexualization process. And it's about the gays, about transforming this 13-year-old in a novel who's mildly, he's interesting enough, but to appeal to a different audience, that he has become something to look at, a male figure to look at.
You know, there's something else too, though, along this line. Along with that, I looked up some of the terms from last week, and one of them was the gaze or the look, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it seemed like part of the definition of that was the actual look of the people on the screen, right?
Mhm.
Not just the way that they look at each other, that they engage the person watching the film, but the way that they actually look. And in the book, you know, the mother has this gap in her teeth, and everything every
She
time
has to
she
cover her
laughs, she
mouth.
covers her mouth. Obviously, the actress who played the mother did not. She was a
Very
very
straight,
beautiful
nice
woman, very straight, nice teeth. There was the absence of the lazy eye in the boy. Obviously,
Big
that
glasses,
would have been-
horn-rimmed
he had
glasses.
glasses, right?
And he made
nonetheless, but-
a big deal
also
of it.
older. Like he looked more like probably like a 12, 13.
But the difference between the book and the film version obviously made that leap, right? It was
Mhm.
like, okay, well, these people have to be pleasing to look at, right?
Oh, yeah. And talk about beautiful middle-class family.
Yes.
Her outfits, yes.
This is something that really stands out if you watch like TV and film from decades past. Like I like watching The Twilight Zone
Mm-hmm.
from the 1960s.
Mhm.
You will see these amazing actors, but in the back of your mind, you're thinking you are not attractive enough to be on TV today.
Today, exactly.
True.
Cary Grant. He's my all-time.
With a few exceptions.
He is my all-time love. Yeah, it's something happens, but okay, I've listed up here a term, epistemology of the visual, a great term to toss around at cocktail parties. So the first thing to know is what epistemology means. And so the definition here from, yes, I'm using this, the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy, but it's simple, you know. It gave me the easiest, clearest definition. Study of knowledge and justified belief. So basically, epistemology is how we know what we know. Now, it's what we know. Epistemology is a study of what we know. the knowledge and justified belief, concerned with what are the necessary and sufficient conditions of knowledge, what are its sources, what is its structure, and what are its limits. So when I say epistemology is a study of what we know, that is really oversimplified, but it needs to be in order to add it to the rest, the visual part, and to get a hold of it. That's when it becomes a little bit more complicated. So epistemology of the visual then is going to be that we know what we know by seeing it, by the visualization. What happens with this film, and I think I'm going to write this up as an article, depending on what happens in the other two, but I may be able to do enough with one. Epistemology of the visual occurs here when we actually see the black family, this beautiful, beautiful black family. We cannot just throw off that, I could not see a black family. It was part of my consciousness of it. In the reading of the novel, I forgot, unless I was reminded.
Exactly.
But there is no, every moment is a reminder, because you see this family in their skin. And like I said, quite a stunning family. I'd go out with them.
Julius Campbell off of Remember the Titans. I was like, I thought he looked familiar.
Oh, yeah. It's just wonderful.
Made me really happy.
Yeah. So we know what we know by what we see. Seeing is believing. That goes way back. And it's easy for us to think perhaps that's always the way it's been, but it's not. Because there have always been different ways of knowing. Now, I have made this up, what I'm going to show you, entirely made it up. There's probably gaps of all kinds. I haven't thought it all the way through. I know there are crossovers, but so we've got the epistemology of the visual, which dominated by images, what we see. We are an exceptionally visual culture now. In fact, what's his name? I can't remember his name, but he says, we have taken a pictorial turn, a visual turn, so that everything, we have become very visual. Television, internet, billboards, everything.
Even reading is visual.
Even reading.
I tutor young elementary kids, and the way they teach them to read is literally like they give them a list of 20 sight words, and it's words that phonetically you would be able to read.
Yeah.
They don't teach them how to read phonetically.
They
just teach
recognize
these words and know what they are. It's all visual based.
Well, and I think in our texting language too, like with all the emojis and with memes, and like my brother in particular would rather communicate with pictures than he would send me a text.
Mm-hmm.
It's just his preferred method.
Well, in video games, back to completely visual.
Where is it? Right here? Well, that's sinuses.
And I put 1941 was the first television broadcast, so I'm kind of putting it back to that period. That's when we start relying very heavily on visual communication. What? Where'd it go? What? Uh-oh. There it is. I got it all screwed up. Epistemology, they're written, so it's dominated by the written word. I'm putting it around the early 1600s because of the printing press and the first newspapers. Paper, print culture governs. Literate culture. So at this time, certainly visual things mattered. Folks are reading things, and in fact, when it comes down to previous texts, they were very visual in the calligraphy and the illustrations that so many of them underwent. Beautiful, beautiful. It's not illustration, I can't remember.
Illumination.
Yes, illumination. Thank you. Y'all look so good. eliminations, beautiful, beautiful pieces that had to take forever to put together. Epistemology of the scientific, and of course we still live in that part, but dominated by scientific fact. The scientific method, the scientific revolution, 1450s to 1720s, Copernicus to Newton. In this instance, science is how we know the world. We still know the world through science. So you can see there are always crossovers. It's just what one dominates at the time. And then epistemology of the church. That's the earliest one that I've identified. Beginning around 325 AD with the Council of Nicaea. So here we have the epistemology of the church because it's the church that tells us what we know. In fact, the church is the human. It controls everything. In the medieval world, for instance, you would have, when somebody got, what is it when you get tossed out from? Excommunicated. When somebody got excommunicated in the medieval world and before, that was a death sentence. Because people lived within walls quite frequently. And everything they might be living just outside of the walls, but that's where their food, their water, they came there to sell, to buy everything. If somebody was excommunicated, they were out. They didn't get to come to the town. They didn't get the protections of the town. They were left to their own devices. And if you're living in Europe in the winter, in the medieval world, it's not going to be easy to make it, especially if you're by yourself. If you're a woman, that would be an automatic death sentence. So the epistemology of the church, it's informing the whole world of this not the whole world, but the people of the Western civilization, to speak of. I didn't include the Papal Palace at Avignon. But if you've read, who is it? Ken Follett. Is that how you say his name? Ken Follett or Ken Follett? Ken Follett's Pillars. Have you read that? Oh my gosh, I love those. It tells about the churches and how these enormous churches with the flying buttresses or cathedrals, not churches. The cathedrals came into being and the work that it entailed and how it happened. It's an amazing story. And it took millions of dollars and lives to build these things. But that's, you make big that which you privilege. And epistemology of the church still exists, but things have come into tension with each other. So church and science, for instance, religion and science, because you have the heretics for believing that the Earth is the center of is not the center of the universe, that the sun that we orbit around the sun instead of everything orbiting around us. Talk about centric. So these different epistemologies, we've lived them in different times. So when we're working from the epistemology of the visual, now let's see where. So when y'all look at it, because if the epistemology of the visual is currently all-powerful, then appearance matters. And so when we see that film, and we see a black family, and we see I'm really glad I think they maybe upped them a little bit in terms of middle class, kind of maybe more of an upper middle class, judging from her clothes, because they're not great clothes. Mm-hmm. Was able to buy that. They stretched it a little bit on this trip and buying going to the expenses that they did, but they did it anyway.
The Ultra Glide.
The Ultra Glide. Wasn't that great?
Such a thing as the Ultra Glide.
I did not either. You're gonna have to look. All right. So, those ideological shifts, that's one of mine. One of the thoughts that I'm having. I want to incorporate in it my ideas about how I think we're supposed to perceive the book, but then what happens with the epistemology of the visual when we actually see the family. Now, maybe because it is such a beautiful family, we are more attracted to it than before. I don't know. That's a possibility. But you can't forget that they're Black. Because the film reminds us all the time. It reminds us of the strife. We're seeing the actual, what is it that they do in the kids?
They went to the diner to grab some hot dogs, and they're like, "We don't serve you."
Exactly. So, and that is a reference to the whole shebang about what was it, Woolworths that they went to the counter?
I think so.
I think it was. So that's a historical reference that some people might or might not get. And Byron wanting to be heroic. Maybe they'll be proud of me if I, what is it when they walk, when they protest?
Yeah.
March, thank you. Yeah. And the group, when they're sitting there talking to each other about she's got a scar on her knee, that was really poorly staged. It was bad acting all the way. Did you catch that too?
Oh yeah.
Oh my gosh.
I was like, I had my mom watch it with me. I was like, Mom, you have to watch this. It's such a good story. I haven't watched the movie yet, so I haven't watched it with me. And when we finished, I was like, 1, the book is 1,000 times better. Please read the book. But 2, I was like, this scene was not in the book at all. This is
and it doesn't fit. It doesn't
fit.
It was poorly acted.
Where did they come from, and where did they go after that one scene? Like, we never saw them again.
Yes.
Especially because they were already talking about how pretty much everyone was already leaving. Like, their family probably wasn't already there, like, if we went by, like, the book and everything. Because they were talking about how everyone was up and leaving.
Oh, yeah.
Because of all the bombings and everything. I'm like, where did they come from, though?
It also had that sense of a documentary feel to it because of added actual footage and because of the filters that the
weird, like, cutaways they would do.
Exactly.
And some of those I felt like, I did take a film class in undergrad, and we did, like, in-depth film studies. So some of those cutaways I wondered about where they were placed, why they chose to place them there. Like, there was one specific one where they're driving in the car, and the mom and dad are talking about what's on the radio about, I don't know if it's about, like, the bombings or something like that. And they have this, like, troubled look on their face, and then it suddenly cuts away to that weird filtery thing and then goes right back.
Was it about Medgar Evers?
Yes, and they cut away to that. But the other times they use them are all these, like, joyful, happy times when they're enjoying the radio and being together and laughing. But that one was the only one that was, like, very serious, and it stuck out to me.
I have some issues with the editing, I do believe. I do believe.
I mean, I think with those situations, because one of the things I felt like whenever they had serious situations such as that, or like I think even before, whenever they were going to go before the trip, there was the news scene on there. And I think to me, it just showed them how sheltered they were. Because it wasn't until they got to Alabama that Kenny and Byron actually experienced actual racism.
Like, I felt like the parents didn't even, like, warn them. Like, hey, we're going into a rough part of the country. You might see some crazy things. They're just like, okay, we're going. Let's go.
I'm determined to teach Byron a lesson. Like, they didn't tell him what that was going to be.
There was no, but not even for, like, I don't know. I just think about my children, like my 8-year-old, like, you know, is kind of like Joey. I would have kind of been like, I don't know, warned her. I just felt like they needed a warning. Like, they were very sheltered from it.
I think, like, contextually, though, that would have been the case.
I'm going to show you a little bit. Oops, that's wrong. I almost shut it down. That was close. It's a blue light. says push me.
Oh,
it's shutting down.
What?
Computer.
Crap. No.
Finish
Oh,
it
it
up.
is.
No.
It is just, stay with me all, because I think I just turned the computer off, not the whole shebang.
Girl.
Oh,
Are y'all still with me? Good.
Yes, ma'am.
We're here.
All right. Yeah, it'll come back on. Phew. That was close. No.
Now knowing what they say, I'm gonna paint like a weird clown face on the back of my head.
I like this view so much better. I haven't been able to see you guys very well this whole time.
No, it's really a shame.
So this is the first time I've even seen you, Dr. Stewart. Really?
Yeah, and I decided, I made a life change, or not life decision.
Quit!
I'm gonna wear jeans and stuff, because I'm on campus from about 11 o'clock
You're a pain in the
until
ass.
10. I know. And I figure I'm just gonna be comfortable.
Yes.
yeah. Constant.
I'm gonna have to go to school to do this, aren't I?
Now, let's see if I can open that DVD player instead of turning it off. Thank you. Is there any scene that you particularly want to see from Watson's and talk about it? I have it. From the film. Anybody?
There was something that I read into the book. I wonder if anybody else picked up on this, maybe. So Byron, when he's like looking in the mirror, in the beginning of before he gets his lips stuck to the mirror, he says, I must not be related to you people because I am so good looking.
So handsome.
You know, people as ugly as your parents could never have made someone like me. And then when the father is telling the story of when he proposed to the mother, Hambone they had proposed at the same time. And then later again at the end of the book, he says kind of the same thing. I was wondering whether or not maybe he wasn't actually he was maybe.
He did mention it right after he was comforting Kenny in the bathroom. He did it again in the mirror.
Yeah.
But see, I
was just wondering. I mean, they didn't explore it. They didn't go there. Not that he was adopted, but maybe he was.
That he was Hambone's son?
Yes. Because they both proposed.
Look at you guys.
I'm just saying.
It never even occurred to me.
I started thinking that after the movie because I feel like the dad said something.
That never occurred to me.
Like made a slight comment about it.
Yeah, he's like, you all would have had bumpy heads, you know, and
then makes fun of his naughty head.
Yeah, and then she made fun of his naughty head when his head was shaved.
Oh my gosh.
But see, I just thought that he was mouthing at himself in the mirror to remind Kenny of the time whenever he got his lips stuck to the window.
Yeah, I mean, you could. I don't know.
It goes both ways.
I think there's also, I think the book has a lot of aspects where it talks about masculinity.
Oh, yeah.
And toxic masculinity versus non-toxic masculinity. There's that scene where Byron kills the bird and then he goes out and cries afterwards and he's ashamed of crying, right? So like toxic masculinity.
Right.
There's the instance, there's like some specific instance where the dad shows, and I noted it in here, but where the dad shows an aspect of masculinity. Oh, they say we never realized how sensitive dad really was.
Mm-hmm.
And that shows masculinity that is non-toxic, right? So I just thought that was him saying that again at the end was like, okay, we've had this sensitive moment, now we gotta joke around.
No, we
can't stay in this sensitive moment.
Okay, you want to explain toxic masculinity?
Toxic masculinity is like the social training, I guess, or teaching that men cannot be sensitive, they can't show emotions. Masculinity is this like, we're gonna all get up and fight, and like it's just very much this like toxic. Don't acknowledge that you need help. don't ask for help. You're the man. You need to do it yourself. Man up.
And it's toxic for everybody.
Yes, it's toxic for women, and like it feeds into rape culture and things like that. It's toxic for men because, you know,
then they have to internalize.
There's a stigma of mental illness or needing help, period. It's just toxic all around. But I think this is a good example of Byron. He's in that toxic masculinity, right? He's this juvenile delinquent. He kills birds, but deep down he's not, right? He cries when he kills the bird. And his dad is a perfect example of, I think, a perfect example of that balance of, right? Like, he takes care of his family. He teaches Byron, you know, hey, the world's, he does it in the book very well. Hey, the world's not like it is here in Flint down south. It's not. I have to teach you what it's really like. You know, he wants to shelter his family, but he's very sensitive and caring at the same time. So he's a good balance, and I think a good foil for Byron as well.
I think in the film, the toxicity of Byron comes through way, and part of it's because he's older, but he's got a really angular face, and
you have very sharp features.
Sharp features. Now that's what we praise and prize is high cheekbones in both men and women, and that sculptured look. Mm-hmm. At the same time, his expressions in the film were borderline violent.
Scary, yeah.
Scary. Yes. And Kenny in the novel talks about, you know, Byron is a bully. There's no getting around it. And he
kills birds with mouse traps.
And cookies. And cookies.
I mean, he
That's the
takes
most
on his own
ruthless
brother. I
of
know
all.
he protects him to a slight degree, but he also is, you know, part of the reason why he's got nicknames, and he also doesn't always step in, and sometimes he's the bully himself to his own little brother.
Yes.
Well, and then whenever he does step in, he overdoes it. Like whenever he had that kid pinned up against the chain link fence, and he's just going after him like
overcompensates.
But that's toxic. That's toxic.
Yeah, because he also is. Everyone's gathered around, they're like, and he's like, oh well, all these people are here. I've got to make sure I put him in this place, because otherwise, I'm not going to be a man.
Mm-hmm. And because we don't have that epistemology of the visual in the novel, it's harder to think about 13-year-old Byron as being toxic, really, as toxic as it is in the film.
Yeah, because you don't get the facial expressions that are constantly in your face as you
I
get.
just kind of imagine like a normal angsty 13-year-old who does get into a lot more trouble than like most, but at the same time, I'm not picturing 20-year-old man who looks like he's about to come through the TV screen and punch me.
Yeah. And this is, all right, so I was born in 1956, 7 years old in 1963. I can do some math. My brother was older, he was 7 years older than I was. And I see Byron and my brother, Buddy, together. My brother was well, for then, it was being so rebellious. So he bleached his hair blonde, wore it long, my mom and dad were constantly called by the principal, your son's wearing jeans that are too tight, his hair is touching his collar, and he has bleached his hair. And mom and dad were pretty much, they defend my brother pretty much because they thought that was all quite foolish. But he's growing up during a time when it's shifting from the 60s into the 70s, Beatles. So it's after Watson's, but it's the Beatles that are influencing him so much. And the United States is in turmoil. It's rebellious. You've got the civil rights movement occurring at that time. So everything is in turmoil. Just like the Woolpoo in Collier's Landing, everything is disrupted because of the civil rights movement. And as things are changing, and you've got your hippies and flower power. And when was Woodstock? Is that in the 70s?
Late 60s, I think.
Late 60s?
68, I want to say.
Yeah, so this is a time that I don't think we'll ever see anything like that again, where the nation, it's just coming from all sides, from anger from teenagers at what adults are doing, anger at the upcoming, Vietnam is out there in the...
We're not seeing that tonight.
It was kind of an era of turning away from the previously established norms.
It
in
was.
a lot of ways, right?
It
I mean,
was down with,
Down with the establishment.
down with the establishment.
This epistemology of the church, for instance, right? That for years and years, I mean, you could say a couple centuries, right? The church was king in America. And then,
Yes. Well, in Europe especially, too.
And during
Yes.
the 60s, there was kind of this dawn of the age of Aquarius, right?
Yes.
People are turning to the occult, people are turning to New Age mysticism, all of these other, exploring all of these other things and kind of departing from the norms. Not only rebelling against authority, but rebelling against these, these thought patterns that have been so prevalent for so many years in our society. It really was a turning point.
Yeah, it was, like I said, I don't know that while we're in, a lot of turmoil right now, I don't think we'll ever see it coming from so many directions again. If we do, we're in bigger trouble than we'll know how to handle. Because if we had to go through the same thing now that we did then with so many directions from unrest, civil unrest, teenagers being really, when Byron I kept thinking, he's 13. He's not going to be doing this. He's living in Flint, and they're living in what I would assume a decent neighborhood. At the same time, he's angry, and he has every right to be angry. He's finding out that he can't eat with everybody else. They live in a fairly sheltered community, I'm guessing, where they're not getting that exposure. Because the North was not good.
Right.
It was better, but it was not by any means perfect. Lots of problems there. But the bombings weren't, that wasn't occurring on a daily basis like it did in Birmingham in '63. Yeah, I don't know what would happen. We've got some of that same turmoil.
But our teenagers are mostly just eating Tide Pods, so I think we're okay on that.
Well, I don't know. I mean, you have the kids who stood up against gun rights and things like that.
That's true.
That was a big.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying. I mean, we're maybe not seeing it quite to that degree, but we are seeing.
And it's not prolonged.
Things coming back.
And it's not prolonged.
Yeah, it's not.
It's still happening, but the press isn't covering it.
Right.
For whatever reason.
No, they're too busy covering people burning Nike stuff.
So I don't know exactly what to make of all of it, but I know it was such a tumultuous time. And
when I was watching the film today, my grandmother came in and she was like, "Oh, I remember when they bombed that church in
Birmingham."
Like she remembered watching it, hearing about it, seeing it happen.
Yes. And the whole thing about Governor Wallace and his speech about segregation now, segregation
tomorrow, segregation forever.
Forever. And I do want to show you something from that.
Like off topic, but while you're doing that, have you seen the Black Klansman?
Not yet.
Very good.
Yeah?
Are there special features on that disc?
I think so. I think isn't Black Klansman a book too?
Yes, it is. And it's based on a true story.
Yes.
I didn't know that when I saw it. I knew that after I looked up, but
Stay away from the panel. Stay away from the panel.
While it goes through this, did anybody else read Mrs. Davidson, the next door neighbor, as a white person?
Yes.
Yeah.
I read her.
I
as
did
white.
not.
And whenever, because I was like, why would an African American woman give a white doll to another?
Because that's what they had.
Yeah, I was saying that.
Because that's what they had.
Okay. Because they were in the north, I read her as white.
I did read her as white.
And so whenever she showed up, not white, I was like,
I read her as black.
I read her as white, but when they presented her as black, I wasn't like,
oh,
that was shocking. You know, I mean, I get exactly what that wasn't a
I was more shocked that, like you said, I would have felt like she would have been more sensitive to that.
I thought that's why
As
Joey
someone
was so
who
offended
can do it too. Yeah.
Because she was white, and that was why, but.
Play, please. It's not divided up into chapters. Shoot. I want music. Did I read it?
Four Little Girls is on the left side, down at the bottom.
Mm-hmm. Go
Guide
about
me.
midway.
next to Mr. Scruff Ninja Tuna.
Yeah. To the left.
Ah, there it is. Okay. All right.
Segregated city in the United States.
SCLC. I take it from that statement that you are going to stand in that door and
me around on 17th Street in front of a cafe called Zanzibar. That's when it knocked me down. But it was so much of hate here then. So they said, got to get this lady to the hospital. I said, no, I was afraid to go to the hospital. So I didn't know where they'd take me out over there, so I just suffered the cough.
Yes, I'm going to say this.
Was that
I can tell you the truth with the holes and the dogs.
Where they're dancing.
I was really afraid.
No.
But I respected what they were marching for.
Hey,
so I didn't march.
That was.
I was in Princeton, New Jersey, when the fire hoses and the marches in Kelly Ingram Park and near the church were held.
Things she did in school, and this was taken one Sunday in Tupelo, Mississippi, when we lived down there. We had come home from church, and she had gotten tired of staying because we would go for Sunday school, and it would seem like an all-day thing. And she went to sleep, and she was very wrinkled. And her daddy liked the little outfit she had on, so he said, I want a picture of this. I said, well, let me press it. No, I want it just like it is. This was that strange brick that penetrated her skull that a friend of mine at the cemetery saved and gave to my mother, and my mother some years later gave to me.
When I was going to school, before, after she had died, when I was going to school, it was like, you know how you just, you remember such a good time you used to have, and you know you're going to have a good time when you go home because you're going to get what...
Because he had read in the paper, I think, good friends and family who gave us a lot of support. And I just had to work with it and pray. Grandchildren. So I have something to be thankful for after all.
I want the features. Because there's one where Governor Wallace, the former Governor Wallace, has a person helping him. He's a black man.
Yes. Oh, yeah. This is my best friend in the whole wide world. I don't know where
Guy is so uncomfortable.
Oh, yeah.
If I could figure out how to get there.
You could probably Google it.
You're right.
Technology's hard, so I just Google things.
Awkward moments. Yes, indeed. Such an ugly man.
Trying to do his best.
I
didn't mean to think for black people. I tried free textbooks because black children can buy textbooks for the children to go to school. So when I was governor, I provided free textbooks so that black children would have to drop out of school. Can buy textbooks.
George Wallace, when he was an elected person in office, was very much like
it's one of the girl's fathers.
The situation, the story I had in the Reader. And in the Reader, the horse he used to be a fire horse, and he was sold to a milk company. And so when he was sold to the milk company, one day the milkman had stopped at the house and was going up to set a bottle of milk down, and this fire whistle blew. And when the fire whistle blew, the horse took off with the wagon, broke all the milk. George Wallace was that type of person. As long as George Wallace was sitting down talking to you one-on-one, nicest guy you ever want to sit down with. But when the cameras came and got on him in the political arena, he turned to that fire horse and he would break every bottle of milk on a truck.
Oh, here, tell me, man.
Ed, come over here. Just 1 minute.
Kid's one of my best friends right here. My best friend right here. I wouldn't go anywhere with him all the world with me.
Can I go now?
I'm gonna slip out now.
You stand for all him number 350.
Man.
Better than Trump trying to shake hands with people.
And he kept calling him back in.
Uh-huh.
What? I don't know. No, that's not what I want. Let's go there.
In 1963, Birmingham, Alabama was a heartland for the civil rights movement. It was also a battleground for the violence of racial segregation. On September 15th of that same year, 4 black girls met an untimely death when a bomb went off in their Sunday school church.
Okay, so that's...
Our founder, Herman DeVry, was inspired by technology. Today, technology is at the...
I can't change it right now.
Well, I want you to know that night couldn't have been any more painful than seeing her laying up there with a rock smashed in her head than to tell her that I couldn't buy her that sandwich down there because she was black. And I'm not sure she ever understood that.
What happens in this film is you come to know the people that died and the people that survived them, which is a powerful statement. It also helps you appreciate it, and how it'll help me understand this, how this was different than just one more terrible act of violence in the civil rights revolution.
As Dr. King said, and as Andy Young says,
and it wasn't
until Birmingham was the place where segregation ended.
2000. Can somebody look up when they finally brought
that not only was pivotal along with the demonstrations that preceded the church bombing and changing segregation, but I think this was the event that changed Birmingham
Cherry, was that his
internally.
name?
Birmingham was never the same. The white resistance.
Okay, it doesn't have.
David Van ever testified that he saw Chambers stand on the corner?
Let's see if I can find.
Special features.
Where? Oh. Jeez.
It's late. We all understand.
19. Oh, no.
No.
Cherry was the last one. Bobby Frank Cherry was the last one. He was convicted in 2002.
What? 1963 to 2002.
Wow.
No, that's not what I want. How am I going to get back?
I can't remember the exact date, but it was when I was in film school, NYU. I was in NYU Film School from 1979 to 82. And there was a story that was on the cover of the Sunday Times magazine section.
Where it says DVD next
and it was
to the
about
stop button.
4 little girls.
You should be able to go back.
And I wrote Miss Mary.
That's it now. May 2000, different grand jury indicted each of the 2 suspects, Thomas Blanton, and then there's Cherry. That says 2000. Is that what? Did you say 2004?
He was convicted in 2002.
Okay. I guess. All right, I can't get to where I want to because it's not set up in chapters like it's handy to get to. But at the end where he's talking about where Governor Wallace is, it's just a one constant embarrassment after another one because he keeps dragging Ed back in and talking about, and then he refuses to answer a question at one point because that wasn't in the script. He'd been given questions. So.
I think those were in the actual documentary because we watched that. Those in comments.
Yeah, I just can't. I can't make it get where I want it to go on there.
They were awkward.
They were awkward to say the least. What other thoughts do you have about our combination this week? I think it was pretty interesting to have all 3. If you could get to that one, yes.
We've probably already kind of covered this, but one change that kind of really bothered me is in the book, they were going to Alabama because Byron was angry.
Yes.
In the movie, it's Byron's angry, but I want to see my mother. So the whole family, minus Dad, is going to spend the summer instead of just Byron. We're going to let Grandma Sands straighten it out.
Yes. And Dad goes home. And the whole thing about putting the church, Joey's going to be singing and
helping lead the church service.
Yes. And I didn't understand that shift. I'm sure they had it was probably something for continuity, getting from one place to another.
Also, because how we were talking earlier about how the movie focused more on the historical events and the book focused more on the actual family. I wonder if they were trying to put that in there to show more of the family, to make it a little bit more like the book and give us that perspective.
But Dad leaves.
I mean, we also we see a lot of the dad in the book, but also we don't see as much the kids. He's not as important as the children are, so maybe that's why.
Yeah.
Can we talk about that weird scene in the book where the mom burns Byron?
Oh my God!
Yes.
The Vaseline!
I'm sorry, I was like, again, this is the second time reading the book, and just as much the first time, the second time I was like, what the hell is happening right now?
Did that just really happen?
Yeah. She's burning her son, and she's setting him on fire. And they didn't do it in the movie. I was really glad that they did.
That was a wise move on their part. Yeah.
It would have gone up to PG-13, man.
Yeah, no, I just have written in the back of that chapter, what the hell? It's just written in big letters, because, it definitely taints my idea of mom a little bit.
But at the same time, she gives a good reason for it. Didn't she saw someone got burned or something?
Their house burned. Their house burned down or something.
She kept trying to tell him to stop doing it.
This is also 1963.
Where
corporal punishment.
Yeah.
Setting her children on fire, though.
She was just burning his fingers to make sure he got the message.
Just a little bit.
Just a little bit of them on fire.
She had Vaseline.
I like how she told Joey, she's like, I have to do it because I said I was going to do it. You don't want me to lie.
That's right. Follow through there, man. You gotta follow through.
Joey is so funny about that, trying to blow out the match. I think we got the sweetness of Joey through on both of them very nicely, and Kenny's naivete to a pretty good degree. But I'm thinking though the important parts for what I want to do with this is look at that toxic masculinity. What happens when it changes from book to film in terms of actual viewing the individuals? You think I'm off on that?
No.
No?
It's definitely like a lot more
prevalent.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And severe.
Yeah.
And including the
age and like just
the age difference with him looking like a man, and then the whole physical body part. Because that kind of made me uncomfortable, actually.
Yeah, maybe a little. Yeah, because I'm still like, now he's like a 13-year-old in the book, and now I'm just like, oh, it's like a 20-year-old man. It's so freaking me out because I'm just still picturing him as a 12, 13-year-old.
Yeah.
That was
I work with 12 and 13-year-olds, and they're just like so awkward right now. Like,
yeah,
I remember
he's
how
not awkward at all.
No, he's smooth. He's cool daddy for sure. Cool daddy for sure.
I just think he would be taller though.
I thought he was tall. He's not.
But here's the thing, Kenny is nearly as tall as Byron is in most of those shots.
Okay.
So the actor was 22 at the time.
Well, that explains it.
That's the other thing about casting that I find such issues with in movies is that characters are supposed to be like 12 and they have like these 24 beautiful people, and I'm like, I didn't look like that at 12.
Well, in in Wonderland or Oz, the huge age difference that we have with what it is in the book and what Judy Garland is. I mean, they try to play her down,
but yeah,
it's still quite obvious that she's a young woman, even if they do dress her in blue gingham and pigtails with ribbons.
In the film's defense, they never explicitly stated that Byron was 13. They never stated any of their ages.
No.
That's true. I mean, they took a little creative liberty.
So
you could reasonably argue Byron maybe 16.
Well, and it's easier to believe that he's as bad. He's bad enough to be taken to Grandma Sands as an older, just like my brother. He was 15, 16. He was about 16, and he was a mess and a lot of trouble. He was a juvenile delinquent.
I think the challenge of straightening a 16-year-old out is
way more difficult.
much higher than straightening out a 13-year-old, though. Like,
at the same time, the hormones are definitely running more rampant around 13. It's going to be a little bit harder, especially because they're just getting puberty, and so they're even more confused about it. At least at 16, they've
No, they haven't. No, they haven't. It's worse. It's worse, I think.
His middle school years are
Oh God, I hated middle school.
quite tumultuous.
Yeah. Folks
It's
online.
different now, though. It's
Tell us about
different now, though, from, like, I mean, just that, like, you know, I didn't think I knew everything until I was in high school, but these kids are like 11 and they're like, they know the whole world.
Yeah.
I think it's got a lot to do with technology. Like, I have a 13-year-old niece who's all over, like, Instagram and stuff, and she thinks she knows everything. And I'm like, when I was 13, I was not quite this bad.
I mean, they just have so much more access to information. I mean, they very well could know a lot more than I knew when I was that age, just in terms of the goings-on in the world and things like that. I don't think I knew. I knew what was close to home and what was happening in my house and my neighborhood, but to the extent, you know, nowadays it's very different.
Very different.
I guess I just see it differently. Like, I do agree technology has a lot to do with it, but the parenting or lack thereof.
Oh, definitely.
Well, it's an entitlement thing. I think that entitlement thing has been kind of coming on for a while, but I don't think it was as present before. Because I teach too, so I work with 15-year-olds, and it's even worse because our sophomores at my campus are seniors. So they consider themselves to be the top dogs because of the way my campus is run. And it's like, no, you're 15.
Wake up.
It's hard. Yeah, I mean, it's just that sense of entitlement at a younger age from 11, 12, 13-ish, you know. It's like everybody's up about 4 years from where they really are in their mind. Yeah. But,
well, is there anything? Oh, go ahead.
I wanted to kind of just clarify. So you were mentioning like the ideological shifts. would that be an example of one when you were talking about the toxic masculinity in the film version?
Yes. Yeah, because we don't have, well, I haven't read the article yet. I saw something about Byron's heteronormativity, I think, an article about it. I have to read that. And I think it's talking about the book. So I think that will probably play into something that I need to know about looking at that shift. But it is, I mean, all of the business about, including the documentary materials, including about the much more overt message. Curtis keeps the really overt message until the end with the epilogue or whatever that is that he's written. And I mean, it's really evident because even you could be that person. So Curtis is advocating activism in the back. That activism comes through in the film through Byron and him wanting to be that.
And joining the marches.
Yes. That's where the activism comes through. And I think that's a pretty big, important difference because I don't know how many people read it afterwards. I always do. And actually, one of the things I would love to do is a study of the afterwards of historical fiction because almost every historical novel is going to have that. Because if the author didn't get it across well enough in the novel, that author has to beat it in the end. But I don't know who reads them.
Well,
I do.
If it's labeled as an epilogue, I consider it part of the story.
I do too.
Right, and it's there on purpose, so you may as well like engage with that too.
Yeah. Yes, because it's very much. That part is called it's paratext. It means it goes beyond the text, the novel, and talks about. It offers another dimension to it. Basically.
I think that afterward also, even if it's not an epilogue where it's directly part of the story, it provides at least somewhere for you to form some sort of author intent, right? Where the author clearly states like, hey, this is what I want you to get.
This is what I want you to get. Come on now. You think it's about banana nut bread? It's not. This is what it's about. Have any of you read The Devil's Arithmetic? Did we talk about this already?
Oh yeah, I think I did. Ages ago.
Ages ago. So in the afterword on that novel, what's her name? Who wrote it? Jane Yolen. Jane Yolen says that what the character experiences, which is it's a time slip narrative where she's in present time and she slips back into 1942 Poland and she's a Jew. And that's a problem. And so and she ends up in a concentration camp. For the afterword, Jane Yolen talks about how she has put together, she's talking about how the novel comes, she talks about the different concentration camps and that it's kind of what you might call a bricolage of all of these just put together. Of these different concentration camps and the different experiences. And so putting all that together, putting kind of a puzzle together to make this whole story, because there is no time travel, there is no Hana of this period. It's a made up story, but it's all based on truth. So it's an adaptation, another one of those adaptations of sorts. So they always have to offer something. That's one of the ideological shifts I think that occurs is that the overt message of the afterword becomes part of the film experience, and thereby making it more overt. That message of resistance, of activism, because that is not a novel of activism. That is a movie of activism. So, that's good. Other things that y'all want to bring up? Everything seemed pretty cool. Folks online, I've returned your grade book or your discussion boards from last. I don't know when it was remarkable that you got the videos up to me as quickly as you did. Thank you for that. Do you have to stay up all night to put that together?
No, it just takes me like 4 hours.
4 hours?
Yeah.
Gosh. Thank you so much for your very hard work. So I guess then we'll see you next week. Secret Garden, book and film and article. You know what to do. Same thing, different novel. And I'll see you.
I looked up the paper. Do that for